Walking along the Irish coast at dusk, you take a fork in the road and come upon a tiny pub not mentioned by TripAdvisor. Inside, you find an odd collection of patrons. Tall, beautiful folk speaking a strange language, earnest monks recounting holy pilgrimages, and two captivated tourists conversing over their pints. One of those tourists is me, Evangeline Denmark. Welcome to a special edition of Belief to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. This time of year usually finds me enthralled in a story of or legend of Irish origin and longing for the country, culture, and tradition we inadequately celebrate here in the States on St. Patrick's Day. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against green beer and Guinness stew, but my weird little soul wants a little bit more. So this year I've been digging into the life of St. Brendan the Navigator. In doing so, I rediscovered a poem about St. Brendan by one of our Anselm saints, J.R.R. Tolkien. Here to join me in discussing this delightful find is my brother, Dr. John Case Tompkins.
Hello.
Who I call Case. Welcome, Case. How are you?
I am very well. I'm looking forward to this. Yes.
Cool. Me too. So, yeah, let's get to it. So I was thinking, like, as I was kind of digging into this, thinking about that paper that you wrote in undergrad about Tolkien, and I don't remember what it was called, but I do remember it was kind of a big to-do that you were published as an undergrad with your work on Tolkien. So would you call yourself, probably you wouldn't, would you call yourself a Tolkien scholar, or would you just say you're a fan?
Well, I think the difference between scholarship and fandom is probably one of degrees and not of kind. I think if you go far enough down the fan path, that road will eventually turn you into a scholar. So I would say that I have not, since that particular piece, which I actually struggle now to remember the name of, I have not published anything on Tolkien, but he remains a central part of my life, I would say.
And I guess that you read, I did not know this until you mentioned it, or maybe I forgot. You read The Lord of the Rings every year?
I don't know about every year. I read, let's see here. I read a lot of different things over the course of the year. I would say my taste in reading is eclectic, but very, very few books are worth a second dive. Once I've read a book, I'm pretty much done with it. In fact, I usually try and give it away as soon as I've done with it, especially if it's something I think a particular person in my life will enjoy. But Tolkien, I come back to, and I would say that I will read something of his once a year. It is often The Lord of the Rings. This time, actually, I'm in for what might be considered the perhaps not the full Tolkien experience, but like the definitely the marathon. I've finished my reread of the Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and now I am working back through The Lord of the Rings. And Tolkien's work bears rereading. It does not disappoint with further reads. It grows in its beauty and its complexity. This particular time through, I have been noticing how a great deal of The Lord of the Rings is focused around conversations between characters, and which makes it truly epic. If you know anything about real epics, I'm not talking about, what someone calls epic because there was a big battle scene. A real epic is a series of conversations and then fights in between, but conversations, because you want the characters in an epic to demonstrate their prowess with words, and allow them to present ideas. So, but I mean, I discover something new every time I read the books. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
And had you read or had you heard about the death of Saint Brendan, this poem that we're talking about that was written by
Tolkien? Yeah, I did not even know that Tolkien really did much with Irish legend. He was aware of it. I knew that much, but I had thought of him as primarily interested in Germanic legendary, and so this was absolutely a surprise to me. So this is why I say I don't know that I'm a Tolkien scholar, because I can't imagine somebody that is perhaps more knowledgeable about Tolkien than I am. I was, yeah, of course he knows about Irish legend. Here's all the things that he did, and oh, okay, I didn't know. So there you go. No, this was an absolute delight to discover.
Yes.
It was a real treat. So
I think it's safe to say that it's obscure. I have not ever heard it. I mean, like I said, I did rediscover it. I have encountered it once before, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit. But other than that, I've never heard anybody mention it. And I do hang around with a lot of Tolkien nerds, yes. Including you. So
there we go.
So I think it's safe to say it's not that well known. So I think people are going to be excited to discover it, as I was excited to discover it. And there are a few things that are going to, light up your imagination when we read it, because there's some Lord of the Rings ties, just some things that are going to sound familiar, and I think that that's exciting.
Well, yes, no, there's definitely yes, we could definitely talk about that. I would say, with authors, especially someone who's as rich in imagery as Tolkien, when you see things in other parts, you're like, oh, that's a this. But for certain, there are things in this poem that I honestly, as I was reading, that just rang out to me as connections to his larger work. So, but we're going to share this with people today, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Let's share it. Let's give a little brief background on Saint Brendan, because in case people are not aware of who he is. So Brendan was a 5th century Irish monk, often called Saint Brendan the Navigator. He sailed west in search of the Isle of the Blessed, or the land of promise. Pre-Christian Celts, this of course would have been Tir na Nog, the land of the youths, or Undying Lands, which is kind of a common theme that we find in, I don't know if I'm using the term epic correctly.
Yeah, well,
heroic
you certainly
story.
find it in Tolkien. The lands of Valinor are called the Undying Lands. So
yes, obviously there's a connection right there. In the Irish tradition, these stories of kind of the heroic sea voyage to the other worlds, in search of the other worlds, are called Imrama. And so this poem is actually called Imram, the Death of Saint Brendan. That's the title of this Tolkien story.
Really? That is interesting.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. And so, these Imrama kind of capture and preserve that pre-Christian Irish myth, but sort of change the voyaging for voyaging's sake, or adventure for adventure's sake, destiny, into kind of a Christianized version of undertaking a voyage, for God, to deny the self, to serve God, to suffer on Christ's behalf, kind of a martyr. In fact, one of the novelization that I was reading talked about blue martyrs.
Oh yeah.
So the Irish saints would go out onto the ocean the way that other saints would go out into the desert to have their.
Well, the poor Irish. The Irish monks are on Ireland. There's no deserts around. They're just lost. There's no deserts.
So, yeah,
you got a long way.
You got to do what you. Yeah. I will go into the ocean, go onto the sea, and suffer.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and the Imrams or Imrama, that's the plural.
Imrama is the plural.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've only read those one or two in like translation or like a cleaned up version of a text, but even so, found them very powerful. Incredible imagery in those things. So.
Well, I particularly love these stories, even the intersection of, Christianization and mythology, because I think it just encapsulates kind of that blend of longing of our, attempt to understand the divine. You just, if you look, you see that thread going straight through the pre-Christian, stories and myths into, this Christianized version. And I'm fascinated by that. And I think it's amazing and worth digging into. So, but let's go ahead and read. We're going to read for you this poem, Imram, The Death of St. Brendan.
Yes, we are.
And then we're going to talk about it. So
sounds good.
Should I go ahead and lead off?
Ladies first.
Okay. At last, out of the deep seas he passed, and mist rolled on the shore. Under clouded moon the waves were loud, as the laden ship him bore. To Ireland, back to wood and mire, to the tower tall and grey, where the knell of Clonferta's bell tolled in green Galway. Where Shannon down to Loch Durrug ran under a rain-clad sky, St. Brendan came to his journey's end, to await his hour to die.
Oh, tell me, Father, for I loved you well, if still you have words for me, of things strange in the remembering, in the long and lonely sea, of islands by deep spells beguiled, where dwell the elven kind. In 7 long years the road to heaven or the living land did you find?
The things I have seen, the many things, have long now faded far. Only 3 come clear now back to me: a cloud, a tree, a star. We sailed for a year and a day and hailed no field nor coast of men. No boat nor bird we ever afloat for 40 days and 10. We saw no sun at set or dawn, but a dun cloud lay ahead, and a drumming there was like thunder coming, and a gleam of fiery red.
Upreared from sea to cloud then sheer, a shoreless mountain stood. Its sides were black from the sullen tide to the red lining of its hood. No cloak of cloud, no lowering smoke, no looming storm of thunder, the world of men saw I ever unfurled, like the pall that we passed under. We turned away, and we left astern the rumbling and the gloom. Then the smoking cloud asunder broke, and we saw the tower of doom. In its ashen head was a crown of red, where the fishes flamed and fell. Tall as a column in high heaven's hall, its feet were as deep as hell. Grounded in chasms the water drowned and buried long ago, it stands, I ween, in forgotten lands, where the kings of kings lie low.
We sailed then on till the wind had failed, and we toiled then with the oar, and hunger and thirst us sorely wrung, and we sang our psalms no more. At land at last with a silver strand, at the end of strength we found, The waves were singing in pillared caves, and pearls lay on the ground. And steep the shores went upward leaping to slopes of green and gold, and a stream out of rich and teeming through a combe of shadow rolled.
Through gates of stone we rode in haste, and passed and left the sea, and silence like dew fell in that isle, and holy it seemed to be. As a green cup, deep in a brim of green, that with wine the white sun fills, was the land we found, and we saw there stand, on a land between the hills, a tree more fair than ever I deemed might climb in paradise. Its foot was like a great tower's root, its height beyond men's eyes. So wide its branches the least could hold in shade an acre long, and they rose as steep as mountain snows, those boughs so broad and strong. For white as a winter to my sight the leaves of that tree were, they grew more close than swan wing plumes, all long and soft and fair.
We deemed then, maybe as in a dream, that time had passed away, and our journey ended, for no return we hoped, but there to stay. In the silence of that hollow isle, in the stillness, then we sang, softly us seemed, but the sound aloft like a pealing organ rang. Then trembled the tree from crown to stem, from the limbs, the leaves in air, as white birds fled in wheeling flight and left the branches bare. From the sky came dropping down on high a music not of bird, not voice of man, nor angel's voice, but maybe there is a third. Fair kindred in the world yet lingers, beyond the foundered land, yet steep are the seas and the waters deep beyond the white tree stand.
Oh, stay now, father, there's more to say, but two things you have told. The tree, the cloud, but you spoke of three. The star in mind you hold? The star? Yes, I saw it, high and far, at the parting of the ways, a light on the edge of the outer night, like silver set ablaze, where the round world plunges steeply down, but on the old road goes, as an unseen bridge that on arches runs to coasts that no man knows.
But men say, Father, that ere the end you went where none have been. I would hear you tell me, Father dear, of the last land you have seen.
In my mind the star I still can find in the parting of the seas, and the breath as sweet and keen as death that was borne upon the breeze. But where they bloom, those flowers fair, in what air or land they grow, what words beyond the world I heard, if you would seek to know, in a boat then, brother, far afloat, you must labor in the sea, and find for yourself things out of mine. You will learn no more from me.
In Ireland, over wood and mire, in the tower tall and grey, the knell of Clonferta's bell was tolling in green Galway. St. Brendan had come to his life's end under a rain-clad sky, and journeyed whence no ship returns, and his bones in Ireland lie.
Hooray!
Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. More like that, please. More like this.
Yes.
More like this.
Yes,
no,
absolutely striking.
Oh, that's very delightful. That is absolutely delightful. So, where do you want to start with talking about this? I can point out some obvious things, that are connected to what you might call the larger Tolkien legendarium. But I'm really curious, from your point of view, as someone who knows more about Irish mythology than I do, what things you noticed, or just where do you want to start here?
Well, one of the favorite things that I love to talk about when it comes to Irish mythology is, of course, the other world, the longing for that, the understanding that it is close. And so it's interesting that this sort of encapsulates, includes the other world. We get a peek of it, and that was, central to the purpose of the story. I just always want to discuss the symbolism that kind of comes in when they are talking about the other world.
Well, let me ask
And
you.
I think, yeah.
Let me ask you again, because you know more about this than I do. I was under the impression that um, getting to fairy, was something that involved um, almost mistakes, right? A mortal goes into the woods at night at the wrong time and follows the wrong uh, you know parade and ends up in
Mm-hmm.
fairy. And this is not that. This suggests that fairy is something that can only be reached by a voyage. So what's the difference there? What's
Mm-hmm.
going on?
Well, of course, it's both.
All right.
Any oral tradition of storytelling, you're going to find whatever the particular storyteller found useful
Okay.
for their story.
Fair enough.
So you have, of course, the sort of commonplace everyday story of, whoops, we have stumbled into a fairy grove, a fairy ring,
Okay.
whatever. And then there's the idea of being, fairy being under the mounds.
Right.
That's very, common. So it's both.
Okay.
It's, yes, you can stumble into it, but also this searching for Tir na Nog.
Uh-huh.
That is, I think, something different, and I think that is, like I said, speaking to a deeper longing and I want to understand, what's going to become of me. It's sort of like
Okay.
the stumbling into is sort of the understanding of our world is capricious. Things happen.
Okay.
We don't understand why. The crops failed. Well, it was fairies. It's that kind of commonplace superstition, I think. But then,
Okay.
Tir na Nog and the search and the longing for the land of eternal youth is a bigger and deeper, I think, idea, more
Okay.
related to the soul.
So the Tir na Nog is a fairy is a thing that you stumble into, but Tir na Nog is something you have to seek out. But it is a place, like
Mm-hmm.
it's a land you have to go to or get to. Is that
Mm-hmm.
okay? So you couldn't
Well,
stumble
yes,
through
and
a fairy door and end up in Tir na Nog.
depends upon what the storyteller wants you to do.
Okay, why am I
But
asking for there to be logic here? Yeah,
I
that's
know,
fine.
yeah, stop it. The original, the Irish mythologies, and the histories talk about the Tuatha De Danann coming from that island.
Okay,
From an island, not necessarily Tir na Nog, but kind of similar, and the Undying, because the Tuatha De
the
Danann
Undying Lands. Okay,
um, are the ancestors, or the basis of the others, the kinfolk, the fairies. Um, so in a
okay,
sense, there's that mythology from the very beginning of the original inhabitants of this island were um, the Undying, were these mythical beings.
okay. So the importance, the important connection there um, to sort of Ireland is this idea that this was a land once populated by the good people, and
Mm-hmm.
and now it's not. Okay, so you had mentioned earlier about this idea of blue martyrdom and the great Irish saints, and so does Tir na Nog at some point sort of just become uh, uh, connected with heaven, paradise? Like what's going on
Mm-hmm.
there?
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah, definitely. Tir na Nog becomes um, that concept of the promised land, and in Tolkien there's that the Grey Havens, that so this going into the west
right,
to the promised land is, or to the Undying lands,
right. Well,
is
so yeah, let's hit some Tolkien legendary here. So for Tolkien, and I see now I'm sort of wondering like how much did he grab from this? So for Tolkien, in the history of Middle Earth, the elves come into being. They awake on Middle Earth, And the Valar, the kind of like gods, find them in Middle Earth and invite them to Valinor, to the Undying Lands. They go there. Well, some of them go there, and then a portion of that group comes back to Middle Earth, mostly because of the deceits and lies of the enemy Morgoth, and they settle in Middle Earth. However, an interesting thing. So their suffering is great because Middle Earth is the land of Morgoth. Morgoth has a dominion in the north and is constantly attacking them and making their lives miserable. And at some point, the things are so bad that the Valar send, at the request of a great mariner, Eärendil, who comes back to Valinor, although they have, the Valar have sort of separated themselves from the doings of Middle Earth because the elves were disobedient. The elves said, "No, we got this," and then okay. And so Eärendil, a great mariner, brings this request: "Please save us from the depredations of Morgoth." The Valar fight against Morgoth. Morgoth is overthrown. He is captured and thrown beyond the circles of the world. Right? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Valinor is still there. But Eärendil is he marries a mortal. They have children. That becomes the ruling house of Númenor, which is the island of Westernesse. Westernesse is given to the high houses of the humans for their role in helping to defeat Morgoth. But the rule about being in Westernesse, which is like this excellent, like this perfect island that like has everything you need, the animals there are tame, it's great. The rule is you can't sail further west than sight of Númenor. Because if you go any farther, you'll get to the Undying Lands. That's not for mortals. Mortals aren't meant to go to the Undying Lands. Only the elves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, what do humans do when confronted with a simple prohibition, right? For a long, long time, Númenor prospers and has great peace and great prosperity because they're great mariners. But eventually, the kings come to fear death, and they listen to a particularly subtle counselor named Sauron, who you might have heard of. They overthrow Sauron in Middle Earth and then take him back as a counselor. It never works out. So they decide that they are going to invade Valinor, and Valinor, they send out their ships to invade Valinor, and the Valar send a great wave that destroys their armies and sinks Númenor into the sea. So Númenor is the kind of Middle Earth Atlantis. But here's the interesting thing. At that point is when Middle Earth becomes round. They talk about the seas being bent. Before then, it was flat. And Valinor is removed from the earth so that it can only be reached by those Grey Havens, by the ships that go out from the Grey Havens specifically searching there. And the only way you get on those ships is if you are an elf, or something a little bit higher like Gandalf, because he's technically a Maiar, or you bore a ring. And then you get to go on the ships. But it's very interesting because here, let me see, where is this part? So it says, They're talking about the star. Yes. So the star, yes, I saw it high and far at the parting of the ways, a light on the edge of the outer night, like silver set ablaze, where the round world plunges deeply down, but on the old road goes, right? So there is the old road that still gets you to the Undying Lands, but you can't get there otherwise. You have to find that old road. So, yeah, I was like, oh, really? Undying Lands? You have to sail there, and yeah, and the elves were king from there. So yeah, it's like, no, that is the pretty much the story of the Silmarillion. Is the story of the elves forsaking Valinor, forsaking the Valar, because of the lies of Morgoth, going to Middle Earth, and then spending like hundreds of years regretting that decision, being made to regret that decision in really big ways. It's actually one of the things I love most about Galadriel, because Galadriel's story ends and in the Fellowship of the Rings. Her story begins in Valinor and ends, so that the climax of Galadriel's story is midway through the Fellowship of the Ring. And if you like, this is one of those things that Tolkien rewards rereading. That is why, because if you did not know that Galadriel started in the Silmarillion in Valinor and made it all this time, survived all of that to the Lord of the Rings, and what she has done and where she's gone in order to be in that place in that time, and then be offered the ring. Because Frodo offers it to her, right? He says, have it. We're not talking about St. Brandon anymore. I'm sorry, I got distracted. But I think we can definitely say that there is deep, what do you want to call it, symmetry, or maybe just consonance with the Irish mythology of elves and Tolkien's own mythology, for sure.
Well, so. And, we're definitely seeing the themes, the same, that wrestling with the fall and, Tolkien's particular way of illustrating that. You see the same themes, I think, like, maybe this is just like the older that I get, the more interested I am in kind of exploring the same concept, the same idea. I think you find that thing, as a creative, as a person of faith, maybe as an artist, whatever, as a person who thinks.
Right.
You sort of find the things that you want to muse about, to mull over, to continue to work with. And that is definitely evident in this poem. It's familiar. It's like, oh, right. This is Tolkien, and this is his way of exploring our humanity, exploring our longing for redemption, for what we once were, and, how hard it is and how we don't have easy roads. To return to where we were supposed to be.
Well, let's look at these three symbols, these three big symbols: the mountain, the tree, and the star.
Okay.
He says a cloud, a tree, a star. So the cloud.
Well, the cloud is around the mountain.
It's right? Around the mountain, right? And so we can think of two places. I think. Well, two places come to my mind immediately with Tolkien, with the cloud and the mountain. So obviously, Bilbo goes to the Lonely Mountain, and that Lonely Mountain is inhabited by a dragon. And the dragon has destroyed the area all around it, because that's what dragons do. And smoke, of course, because the dragon breathes fire, smoke comes from him, it issues forth from him, and issues forth from the mountain. So there is a clear mountain of fire, right? Or a mountain of doom.
Yep.
And then, of course, the other one is Orodruin, which is in the land of Mordor and is where the ring was both made and where it must be unmade. And I think in both cases, so we see that first, and we see, and in Tolkien says of the what he calls the Tower of Doom, it stands, I ween, in forgotten lands where the kings of kings lie low. So this is the sort of the end of all mortal aspirations, right? That has that very much has a Numenorian flair to it, an Atlantean flair to it. Once there was a great civilization. Once there were great kings in the earth, but they have been laid low, right? And whether it was a dragon or it was their own folly is unclear, but in some sense it doesn't matter. For some reason, I think the fiery mountain, or the mountain with fire in it, must be seen as this kind of symbol of darkness, death, destruction, making, right? Mm-hmm. But the making of the One Ring is not a making, is not good creation, right? It's imitation and therefore bad creation. Because of course, Sauron makes it to master the other rings, right? He doesn't make it for beauty; he makes it for power. Then, what's the next one? The tree, right? So the tree is one of these symbols that is so incredibly rich you can never really come to the end of it. But one of the things that is true of trees, especially, is that they are pattern rich in the macro and the micro level, right? So I look at a tree, there's the trunk, and then there's the branches, right? And then I look at a branch. The branch has a trunk and then branches. And then I look at a leaf, and the leaf has trunk and then branches on the leaf itself. So it is both, it is itself all the way down and all the way up. So it is a symbol of the kind of pattern of the universe. And of course, for Tolkien, the Valinor is lit by two trees, Laurelin and Telperion. Well, I think I'm saying that right. There's two trees. There's one gold and one silver, and they light Valinor, and they are destroyed by Morgoth. But they are these incredibly beautiful trees, and so they are both they're made by the Valar. I'm not going to be able to remember her name, but she's the Valar of Yavanna. Yavanna is her name. She is the Valar of green and growing things, and they are made actually after the first thing that the Valar do when they're trying to light the earth is they set up these big columns with lights on them, like big mountains with these big globes on them. And Melkor knocks those down because he's Melkor. And then they set up these trees. And the trees, the whole idea is the trees, they both glow. Their leaves glow. One glows golden, one glows silver. And they glow in alternation. So first, one glows and completely fills the air with light, silver light, and then it kind of darkens down and the other one glows. So, looking at this tree, I was like, okay, a glowing tree that still stands up to heaven, and lights everywhere and has music coming down from it. Yeah, there's a lot there to dig into. And then
and you have the birds as
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, then you have the birds, and of course, some of that symbolism of tree is, of course, linking earth and heaven, which is interesting. Maybe later we can talk about, like, why is the mountain which also has these feet in hell and the top in heaven. Why is that bad? And all this negative imagery. But then the tree is linking, heaven and earth. And then you have the birds as well. And, whenever you encounter birds in Celtic mythology, you are talking about that in between space of this world and the next. And of course, in between spaces are always, really important to pay attention to in Celtic mythology, because that is the sort of the link. And then, when you have Christianization come, you have those birds become the representation of the spirit. So it's another one of those ways that, a symbol just kind of flows, from pre-Christian understanding into a more faith-informed understanding, because birds are in between. They both land on the ground and fly, so they are representative of.
Okay, yeah, and that's interesting too, because I think that the mountain is indeed a symbol of connection to heaven. But here's the interesting thing. So the mythology and symbolism teaches us that Eden is a mountain. So we talk about it as a garden, but in all of the imagery, Eden is a mountain, and at the top of Eden is the tree. That's the tree of life, right? And you can think about the mountain as the Garden of Eden without the tree. Okay? So right? So here's the thing.
Yep.
What is it that the what is it that the people of Babel are punished for? Attempting to build a tower that reaches to heaven. And if we look around the ancient world, we can see over and over again the pyramid, right? Whether you look in Mexico or Egypt, you find them actually in ancient Greece as well. You find them all over the world. The pyramid as a representative of a mountain. It is a mountainous, it is a mountain symbol. And the idea is that you go up the mountain to connect to the heavens, right? So the ziggurats that were built in Tigris and Euphrates at the dawn of civilization, they're these step pyramids, right? And what do? You go up there and you look at the stars. They're there so you can, if you're an astrologer, you can look at the stars and try to interpret the signs of heaven. And there are so many examples of this in so many ancient places in the world where these gigantic buildings seem to be connected in some way with astronomy, trying to figure out what the heavens are saying to us. But so you go up this mountain and you try to discover the secrets of the heavens, right? But what happens on Mount Golgotha changes all of that, right? So suddenly we have God ascending the mountain and dying, right, as a sacrifice. But we take the symbol of the mountain, which is this, we have two lines pointing up, and suddenly we go like this. Now we have the cross, right? Because God has come down to our level, to be at our level. So I think we can see the mountain as an example of human hubris, human knowledge, human desire for power. And this is true in the stories of Numenor in Tolkien. The mountain in the middle of Westerness, there is this mountain, and when the people of the Numenorians first settled there, the mountain is used as a place of worship, and they honor the one God on that mountain at the high points of the year, and later. When their hearts have been darkened, they stop going there. They stop going up the mountain. But it's a it's a natural mountain, like Mount Sinai, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
Moses goes to receive the knowledge from God. It's a mountain like that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't build this mountain ourselves. We're just using it as we should, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think the mountain as something that is a symbol of um, human desire for power and knowledge, not always bad, but always associated with kind of mortality, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
is a way to look at
Well, and
that.
that like teeming, lava, the fire obviously is a
Right.
representation of, the core is bad,
Well,
is evil. So, I think it's
yeah,
pretty.
it's strong and destructive and it burns. It has power. It can
Mm-hmm.
be used, but not. But it will bring the kings low, as it says in the poem. Um,
Right.
okay, so stars. Um, well, what can we say about stars? We haven't said. I mean, so one of the things that is true about so that the stars are beloved of the elves in Tolkien, and the queen of the Valar is Elbereth, who is the responsible for the stars. She is the Valar of the stars, and it is um, it is under the stars that the elves first awaken in Middle Earth. Um, in Tolkien's mythology, there is no sun, and there isn't even the trees light Valinor. Middle Earth is just under starlight for ages and ages, and that's where the elves awake, and so they are the people of the stars in some sense. Um,
Hmm.
but here's the thing. So uh, the trees that I mentioned, right? So the trees that are lighting Valinor, they're destroyed by Melkor. Before they're destroyed, they are captured. The light from them is captured in three jewels, the Silmarils, which are the focus of the Silmarillion. One of those, and I'm not going to go through the story of all the Silmarils, but read the book. But one of those is given to the mariner who goes back to Valinor to plead the case of the elves. His name is Eärendil, and he is set on his boat to travel the night sky with a Silmaril on his brow. Right?
Hmm.
So there's a star lighting the night sky that is holding the light of the two trees. But do you remember Galadriel's gift to Frodo? Remember what she
Yes.
gives him?
The
The star
yeah,
glass.
yeah.
The little glass, right? And he's like, what's this
Right.
going to do me? Right? The light,
Yes, and yes, the light. Yeah.
the light is like, may this be a light to you when all of the lights go out.
Yes.
That is captured light from Arundel's star. So
Hmm.
when Frodo uses it, it is the light from the original two trees caught in the Silmarils and then re-caught in that little glass, that little star glass. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, there's a mention of this in the Lord of the Rings because Sam and Frodo are talking about old stories, and Sam realizes, he says, "Oh, we're still in the same story, Mr. Frodo. We're still in the same
Yeah.
story, right?" So I think we can see the star in all of the ways that we would normally see the star, right? The thing that guides, the thing that we seek towards, the highest, best, goodest thing that we,
Mm-hmm.
the undying thing that will take us beyond the circles of the world. But I think especially for Tolkien, it is also something that returns to us. The light comes back to us from beyond. And I think um, it is interesting that Brendan himself comes back, and he meets Brother Shannon, I guess, this guy, I assume another monk, and he says, he tells what he has seen, and he says, if you want to seek the star, you have to go yourself. I've come to tell you about it, but you are the one who has to go and find it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it for you. So
yeah,
that's
yeah. I was gonna point out the same thing, and it's kind of funny because you threw out there, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. You have to go read the book, which is exactly or very parallel to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you everything about the star. You have to go and seek it, which is it's just perfect for, you want to understand anything. Do you want to, understand your place in the world, or think these, ponder these things? Go search for it.
Yeah, we have seen his star in the east and come to worship him.
Yep, there you go. Like Brendan the Navigator and Tolkien and the Bible.
It's all symbolism. It's all
Yes, everything. Yep, I agree with you there.
Yeah, it's the language of creation, people. We're just noticing it. So,
yes. Well, I think we've covered as much as we can. Do you have any final thoughts? I know we could talk about it.
Yeah, we could talk about it for. Well, I did want to know if there's anything you wanted to say about, or anything we haven't covered about trees from a Celtic perspective. I don't imagine. I just wondered if there's any sort of tree mythology that I'm missing. I know the tree mythology of like Norse mythology, right? So you've got Yggdrasil, the world ash that stretches between all lands and all places and allows you to reach the all the parts of the universe. Mm-hmm. But is there any big tree mythology?
I haven't encountered much in terms of like, specific trees. Of course, individual, things like the ash and the elm can have meaning in, Druidic tradition, and then also, I think it's elm represents wisdom. So it's not specific trees, at least as far as that I've encountered. It's more like they, represent certain things, or certain traits or whatever. So I haven't found anything specific. It's more, it was the birds. And of course, anytime you hear tree, you're like tree of life and all of that stuff comes in. So it was more the birds that stood out to me because I was like, okay, anytime there's a bird, you're talking about the other world, you're talking about the spirit. So that was what stood out to me about the tree.
Well, and there's certainly nothing in here about, I don't think it says, which is odd for Tolkien, but he very specifically does not say what type of tree this is.
Well, but I think that's on purpose. Don't you think? I mean, it's meant to be a tree that's beyond what anybody has seen before.
The tree of all trees, yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it's just, man, he loves to name trees. If he can get a chance to tell you what kind of tree it is, he will take it. He will take it. So
I love that. I confess I have not finished. I'm reading both the translation of the Voyage of St. Brendan, the original, Irish, where it all came from. And then I'm reading this novelization, Brendan, by Frederick Buechner. And I have not gotten too far into at least in the novel, into their journey, a little bit more into the translation. And so, they do, stop on these different islands, and they do, have these different adventures. Cool. All the islands, I know, and it's interesting. Like, you have these people show up at the last minute in the story. It's like they have their party all set to go, and explore, and then these people show up and they want to be on the boat, and I don't know why they don't say no, but of course they don't. But they know that Brendan knows that it's going to be they're going to come to no good, and I just find that entertaining, and of course they do, steal or whatever, end up causing trouble. But I haven't got to the end, so I have not yet encountered the tree in the original. So I will have to see what comes of that.
I will be very
see what I think
curious to know what you say about that. So you'll have to let me know.
Yeah. All right. Well, the only other thing that I wanted to pick your brain about or see if you had this reaction was, did you feel that this was at all, or could be classified as an elegy?
I mean, he dies. Yeah. I would say so. Yeah. Remember, it's Tolkien who claims that all of Beowulf is an elegy. So I would say this counts as the same. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that just that stood out to me. And the first time I encountered this story was actually on the anniversary of the death of a friend, and I don't remember why I stumbled into it. But she was a Tolkien lover, and when they are talking about how they found this land and why would they ever come back, I'm trying to find that specific part, and now my here it is. We deemed then maybe as in a dream that time had passed away and our journey ended, for no return we hoped but there to stay. Was a passage that I found particularly beautiful in that elegiac sense. And that was my first encountering of this story, the death of Saint Brendan, and so it has kind of a special place in my heart because of that.
Well,
that experience.
The poem found you. Symbolism happens. The poem found you because it needed to manifest itself near where you were. So that doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Nope. Absolutely not. That is the way it works. All right. Well, thank you so much for geeking out with me about Tolkien and Brendan and having this conversation. This is my favorite. This is my favorite thing.
Yes.
Can you let people know where to find you? Case does run a podcast and is on the webs. So let people know where they can find you.
Well, in my professional capacity, you can find me at Purdue University. In my geeky capacity, you can find me at the RPG Review Board, where my geeky friends and I review role-playing games, and that is both rpgreviewboard.com and also our Twitter handle. So, that's where I is.
Cool. All right. Well, yes, I recommend any way that you can follow my brother. If you happen to be at Purdue, go take his classes.
Go take my classes.
If you're just wandering around the web, find his podcast.
On the podcast.
All right. Well, thank you.
Very welcome.
Things are winding down here at the mysterious pub at the fork in the road. The fair folk left to dance in a ring beneath the moon. The monks made their way to matins. The tourists have fallen asleep, having made the cardinal mistake of consuming fairy drink. They may never wake. Once Again, Believed to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have a moment, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.